Peter Brennan here. My native land always will be the Skeevy Milltown. And I was born there in 1942 in relation to the War of Independence and the Civil War. I'm going on what I hear rather than what any physical evidence that's there, but there is a lot of stuff that was down through the years. So if you want me to start, I can go back. In my father's family, there was 9 of them. My father, Patrick Brennan, was the eldest. And my grandfather, he was married twice because his first wife died very young when they had one child, and she died young within a year of the first child that was dealing. She went to America when she was 17. So he remarried again, and he married to Sarah Brennan, this time from near Dunmore. Checker Hill is what we have down as being where she came from. And my father, Patrick Brennan, was the eldest. And then the next eldest was Thomas Brennan, and Catherine. She went to America and married in America and passed there. And Maggie was the other daughter, and Honor. And then we had James, and those 3 went to America. Then there was Mary Ann and Peter and John. John also went to America. So the people who were involved in the War of Independence and towards the Civil War, especially Peter, was my father, Patrick, and Thomas also. And we had Mary Ann and Peter, and whom I'm proudly called after, and John. Now, if you want to go through that sequence, my father was in the Belmont battalion, and after Michael McHugh resigned, my father took over as a captain in the Belmont battalion. But it's like everything, the whole place was filled with spies and everything. So it wasn't very long until they got to target the people who were in charge or on top. That's by the RIC, and the worse still when the Black and Tans came. So he, in his term, I know that one expedition, and they set up a blockade on the barracks in Milltown, and there must be information, but at that time, that night they did do that there was no RIC or TANs came out of the barracks in Milltown, so they had to disband without having an engagement there. And on another occasion, I believe they went to the barracks in Castle Grove. Now, the homemade bombs that they made were quite a bit, it had to have everything quite right. And if you had a wet night, you shouldn't do it. So they decided to do it on wet nights so that it didn't happen, because the fuse got quenched by the rain, and that was that. So he became a target, and he used to go to Milltown. So he'd go to the Blue Pig, that was down near the station, the old station in Milltown. But they also got information on that. So he used to walk up the line back to the Skeevy. So it was the shops where he wouldn't even go the road. But they ambushed him on the way up, and he got severely beaten. And it was Frank that told me that story, that it was a miraculous that he ever escaped them, because there was no help. He just was on his own. So that was that. And he got over that, but then on another occasion, which was more severe, across from us, about less than half a mile, you've got the railway bridge, which was the top part of the Skeevy. And the RSA of the clans came from Castle Grove, and they parked on top of the railway bridge in the Skeevy. And when you look across, look across the land, you could see our house in the binoculars. So when he left the house, he had to go left and down through the village in Liskeavy, and he'd come onto the road that just this side of the Liskeavy Bridge and down into Milltown. But as he was coming down along on his bicycle, he could hear the trucks starting above on the bridge, and he knew that that was an entrapment, that if he hadn't done something, that when he arrived onto the T-junction, that they'd catch him, and that was it, curtains. So what he done is, he went into the railway cottage and he brought his bicycle with him. And it's a small cottage, and he asked the people that was in the cottage that they let him in. And in the cottage, it was very pointed, and they had a little slit door up at the side, and it was about 15 feet up the ground, and they had a ladder. So he brought the bicycle and all on himself and put it up into the ladder and put up the ladder as well. So they searched all the fields around. They couldn't believe like that he had disappeared so long, so quick. And they came into the house, searched all the house, and said, "What's up there?" Or they said, "We don't know what's up there because we can't get up there." So he escaped with the chin of his teeth. And I think that was an indication that the next time he mightn't get away. And so I think at that time, and that was very close to the, you see, it all started 1916, mobilized the country in 1917. That's when the Irish were no longer going to accept British rule in Ireland. And they start with organising every area in the country. And that's why every place was organised, and they were not going to accept it anymore. So he knew at that stage that and his predecessor, Michael McHugh as well, they burned his house. It was down in Belmont. And that I know when the Black and Tans came around, all the men would have to leave because they'd have to go. And that was left into my grandmother. She was the only one to stand in the house. But they come into the house and they frightened her to death, and they fired shots and everything in the house. So she was, mentally, she wasn't really balanced after that. And so he had then, I believe, because I have to do some search myself in relation to it, and I know that there is in the barracks in Dublin to look into your own relatives and see what about them. But a relation of ours, she told me recently that she checked, and she said that I believe he went to Belgium. So he came back then when the Civil War was over, and they had resumed in as a farm. So that's that. The other thing about it is, I wanted to say about the statements. If the statements had been taken, we say, not long after the Civil War, when everybody was all the one, it would be a different situation. But when it was in 1953, before the statements were starting to be taken, there was a division. And some of them were a bit biased, and some of them, like my father, didn't make any at all. And Lord have mercy, my Uncle Pete, he died in 1947, so he didn't make any statement either. So I'll just show you for this here, to interlude. My father held that picture up in the house, as long as we were in the old house. And then were the 10 men that were shot in Tuam during the Civil War, after when they were captured by the Free State and taken to Galway first. And some of them the 10 were taken to Tuam, and they were shot in Tuam, and their bodies were remained in Athlone until they were recovered and brought back to their home place. But the one thing he said to everyone, he said, "You see all them men," he said, "they at one time or other hid in the loft in our house." Now that picture is the house there behind me, but in that painting it really doesn't show. It was a kind of a big house, you know. That's a photograph of it, and in here in this area there was a concealed inside in the kitchen. It was all paneled, you know. It wasn't just open into the thatch underneath. So there was this area that was built up, and there was a door in that, and you could go in there, and there was no windows, no nothing. You were right under the thatch, and that's where they used to hide when they come for that. So I jump a bit now again. So Pete Brennan was one of those that was brought to Tuam. He escaped. One Meyer said that he was the one in Tuam when they were locked in Tuam, that he was. I'll explain him, but go back about him as well a little bit more. But he was an expert in explosives, and he blew a hole. That's what I was told by Meyer, his daughter, that he blew a hole in the wall, and he got out, and he had a revolver, and he escaped. And otherwise, he would be one of them pictures there. But that was my father. Now, my father was always a supporter and was a great friend of Paddy Flannery and McDonald, and that's the area they supported. But just one story in relation to the Flannerys, which was told to me, that they were constantly, the RIC and Tans were watching out for Paddy Flannery and his involvement, because they'd done their best. Most of the time, like most of them were on their run because you couldn't stay at home. But they raided so many times and they couldn't get him. So what did they do? The Tans, they took Paddy Flannery's father and mother, I think it was his father and mother, and they put them in the shed out the back of the house, and they put mattresses and everything to the door of the cabin, and they tied it up and they set it on fire. And it was just the lucky, just by the look and skin of their teeth, that somebody, when they ran away, they got out of it, the family died. But like, people doesn't know a lot of what that happened there. But they were always friends, and that was. So I'll move on to the next one in the family. Now, I haven't a lot of information on Tom Brennan, but when they were always looking for Pete, Tom lived in Kilgavern. He had a place in Kilgavern. And it's different from the other Brennan. There was another Brennan, Johnny Brennan, who lived in Kilgavern, who was taken out by the Tans, and there's an article there where he was accused of shooting the landlord Blake, who wouldn't give up the land in Brooklawn, and he was accused of it. And they took him down into the bog in Kilgavern, stripped him and beat him severely, taken away from his family. But that Johnny Brennan was a first cousin of my father. So then we had John Brennan. Now, John, I didn't know about his involvement until after my father passing away. he came to visit. Now, John was a big tall man. He was over 6 foot. Just a small picture of him there. That's him there in the middle. He's a big, strong, tall man, very physically fit. But he told me the story about one day. It was a young lad, we were fairly young at the time, and our neighbour was cutting oats in a field at the back of the house. Their old houses in Liskeavy, and the Tans come on him, and they threatened to shoot him. And he came down across, and he said to them, because usually there was one thing that was probably in everyone's favour, is that the Tans were when they come to probably drunk or something that they couldn't shoot straight, you know. So he says to them, this is his story to me, and I believe it, because aspects which I'll explain through worked out exactly the way he said it. He said there was a horse cart in the middle of the field, and they were cutting oats, and they tackled Michael, well, neighbour, and he came into the field and he said, look, he said, that man has a family. He said, take me instead, and let him go away. And they okay, they allowed that. So he got away out of the scene, and now John was the go-between, the one that was going to take his place. So they lined him up anyway, and it was in front of a horse cart. And I said, you're too close. I said, will you go back, give it a chance, go back far. And then he said, you can't have it. So as they were maneuvering back and everything, he ducked behind the horse cart and ran across the field over a wall and into our own land, the Brennan's, from one Brennan to the other. And he went over that wall, and with shots flying every side of him. And he went over the next high wall as well. And so you were going down into an incline then, which were nothing but furrows and hollows where they used to dig sand out and briars. And there was an area, because he said there's an area there, he said it was a semicircular. When he came home, this land was all developed. But when I knew it had to be right, because the way he explained it, he said, there was briars, he says, as you go down this fall, and there was a kind of a hole where the rabbits and hares could run in it. And he said he dashed in there, and he hid under the briars, and they fired it in every place, all over. But he stayed still, and to the look of God that it didn't get hit. So he escaped that one. But it was a close one. And then this is his story as well to me. I couldn't believe it, but it had to be right, because when he came, he only seen the land as it was cleared of all the furrows and everything, so he couldn't have a chance to see it. So it had to be when he was there. So he told me then that there was always a big contingent of RIC and Black and Tans in the barracks in Castlegrove, because they looked after the landlord. The landlord up there was Lewin. And I don't know if you ever see it, but there's a fine journal that comes out. It's called the Journal of Old Troom Society. And it came out this year, and there's a terrific article there on that by Miss Tierney on loans in Castlegrove. So they were there in the barracks in Kilconley to protect the loan, and they used to travel up to Kilconley for a pint at Blake's. But they were getting the information of who's who and what's what, for the sake of I suspect a pint. And so the Brennans were well informed about by them who's who, and that's what we believe. I believe. And it had another disadvantage. Liskeavy was here. Kilcolny, Castlegar was there, and Milltown was down here. We were just squeezed in between the two. So we were a target from both sides. So John knew that this tattletale was going on in the bar in Blake's. So next time one of them walked outside, he was behind the wall, and he just fired a shot out by his ear, just as a warning that if he done it again, it wouldn't happen again. So he came. They tightened themselves up after that. Now I know there's another raid in the barracks on Castlegar, which they took over for a long time. But that was a big one where they came from Tuam and cut off communications, and it was held for hours and hours. But to get back to that story, he was fingered in, John, for the one that fired the shot. So he stayed aloof for a while, but they arrested him and they brought him to the barracks in Castlegrove, and they questioned him and he denied it and kept denying it. But he was kept for a day and a half, and the usual trick, which I just want to mention, is what just happened here in Galway. If you were arrested and brought to the barracks in the detention area in Eglinton Street in Galway, you were detained there, but then they marched you down to where the barracks, or where the jail was, down where the university is now. But in that march, the cowards, they shot the men in the back and denied it in court and said that they're trying to escape. But that was 46 volunteers that were shot that way in Galway. Now, he would be prone to the same thing, John, and wind up in the next time that they'd meet him. They wouldn't do it openly after letting him out, but if he ever spotted again, he was a dead duck. So at that stage, John left and went to America, and he only came back really after my father dying. You know, we come to Marianne McHugh. I have a great picture of her here, but I have that's a picture of Marianne, a tough lady, no doubt. And Marianne used to carry the messages, and to my brother Frank that told me that she by day she'd go on her bicycle and she had a basket in front and some stuff in it, but under that there was a revolver. So if she was caught, she had to use it, and she went to go to bed at night with the revolver under her pillow. But just a little point of interest is she'd carry a message, but if they caught her, it'd be as blank as that page, and just so that you know that Pete was into chemicals. I'll explain how as well when I come to it, but he was into chemicals as well. But they invented a method of writing the message with the quill, in milk, write it on the paper. Let that dry, and you'd see nothing in it. But if you put a little shake of soot on top of it, the soot would stick to the milk, and there was your message. But they never found that out, and it's a good job. So that's how the messages went. And a lot now that, but Myra Quincannon, Myra Brennan, that told me that's how the messages were carried. So Marianne escaped with her life, but all the time she was in that danger if she was caught. But she did carry the messages, and that that's how she done that. We come to Pete Brennan, my uncle, who I'm called after, and Pete is described as he's describing himself here. This is a letter he wrote for afterwards for is it Martin Connolly to claim his pension, and he also points out that Martin was involved in the skirmish to keep the Free State from coming in from the into Chew, and his title is signed Peter J. Brennan, Executive Brigade Engineer Chew. Now that's a mouthful in itself, but there's nine in my father's family, and Pete was one of the youngest. So Pete was given the opportunity, but I suppose it was a big crowd of them in it, but I believe it was a marvelous opportunity. His mother's sister was Gleason when she was married, and she took Pete in, and right beside the Gleason home in Sean Ballamore, this national school was, and their relation taught in school, and he was taught in school, and I didn't say to fellow Republican too, but from that he went to further education, and you see it wasn't realized as well either when he came back, but he went to France and he became a qualified engineer, and he was also qualified as an electrician as well, electrical engineer. So you can imagine how his skills came to bear on everything in relation to the necessary things that had to be done and engineered. So, as I say, Pete was. I have one picture of him there. It's the only picture I have, but he's in uniform there. But he was shot twice anyway. Miles said he was shot once through the hand, and back in the 60s there, when my son was in hospital, and he had the name Brennan. He said, "Oh, you, this man that was in hospital." He was from Lord Cheshire. He said, "Oh," he said, "you're Brennan." "Oh," he said, I knew your uncle well, your father's uncle. And he called me and he said, when Pete got shot one time, he said, I carried him across Castlegar, because he had a hole in his hand after whatever factor he was in. But if Pete was in every one of them, from all over, as like, there was one person as well there in Liskeavy, Dan McCormick. He died from his injuries, especially I think the one in Milltown where the RIC were on patrol. They went from the barracks to the station in Milltown and came around Belmont and down to meet the Galway Tune Road, and they were ambushed by the IRA at that stage, and that's where two RIC men were shot there. But I think he got shot by one of them as well, but he didn't die at that stage, but not long after. And he had a lot of mercy in them all, and John Patrick, and he was involved in a lot of ambushes. But it'd be hard for me to write the full story on Pete, but he, as I said, he was with the Republicans that was captured out in Drum, out that area, and they were taken to Galway. and they were going to be executed in Galway, but I think there was objections to them being executed, so they took them down to Tuam. So there was so many of them executed, but they were during the Free State, and they were those things that I showed you were executed there. And it was an awful sad thing that put up such a tremendous battle against all the odds. That's how they wound up in the end. But I suppose that's now. What else have I to show you? That's picture there of my father and my mother, Patrick Brennan. I took that picture myself back in the early 50s. Katie Doherty and Patrick Brennan. So that, and there's himself. He's there making the hay, and he always wore the belt and the straps on the knee for the and he always went on his bike wherever he was going. He went on his bike. If there was 2 foot of snow, he'd go to Tuam, but he used to always say, wise man brings the coat, and he'd always see the coat in the back of the bike on a dry day. So he says, I know fool will bring it on the wet day. But what else I just show you, we had a very successful 1916 ceremonies in Connolly, which I was glad to have been participating in. And Mark Killalay, that's young Mark, a lot of immersing him too, but old Mark was a great friend of Pete Brennan. And whilst Mark Killalay was commander in area further down Pete, and Pete was in the area, Milltown, Connolly area. So the oration, that can be had as well, if you look it up, by Mark Killalay on my uncle Pete Brennan. So just to show you his education, because when they built the factory in Tuam, the sugar factory, the Germans that built it, and it was very upbeat, I suppose, technically and everything. But Pete was able to take over in the generation of electricity for the whole factory area. So that's why you see he had the qualifications, and that's why his engineering talents came. But his life was spent mostly on the run, and you see, sleeping out all the time, you see, it affects your lungs, it affects your breathing, and eventually, you know, he died a very young man, unfortunately. But I do remember when I was small, and myself and Bernie and Bridie, we might be playing outside when he'd arrive. But myself, he fought on the side of the Republican, but my father and Pete were always great friends. They were always great friends. He came down back in the late 40s to one of the first radios that ever came into the whole of the village. And the walls of that old house, they were about this width. So he hacked out a hole in the wall to put the radio into it. And on the Sunday when Michael O'Hare would be talking the match, people would gather up around and sit around and listen to it. But they'd be looking into the middle of the floor, and you could imagine with the tremendous, how will I say, voice that Michael O'Hare had. You could picture the ball on whatever area of the field it was in, and everyone was just mesmerized with it, and that's what he did. But I remember him. There was a half door in that house as well. Let's keep the hens out and keep us through sometimes. But playing outside, and he used to come out to the half door, and he'd hand out the bag of sweets to me, and I used to look and say, why me? You know, and I only realised that I was called after him, but I definitely myself, when I was 15, 16, I loved the army, and I joined the FCA in Shoom, and I loved going to when we went over to artillery, and I served my 10 years for where I got my medal for 10 years, but I was wound up at the end of it. It was a pity to see the FCA being dissolved. I think it was a tragedy. And we used to go up to the Glen of a Mall and fire this 120mm mark. And my company, because there was too many in, wouldn't let us go in the end, so I had to give it up. That's how I was forced out of it. But I'd still be going, but it isn't there now. But it was a great achievement. And we had a great man in charge in Tuam, if I would divert a bit, Captain Liam Donnelly. And it was only afterwards that when the film came out about the Niemba ambush, he was there, but he never told us, I always had such great admiration for him, but that was Captain Donnelly. And another man was there as well, Sergeant Paddy Shannon. He went to the United Nations, and he was in the Congo as well. And he said many times he was fired at. He said, all he could do was run like hell. So to just move on to finally that when my father came back between the 1939-45 war, that there was mobilization as well. And Pete Brennan played a big part in the training and organization of that period in case there would be an invasion. So that was the medal my father got for that series at time. But as I say, neither he nor my uncle Pete had, well, the thing about collecting the statements wasn't out at that time. So I don't know, Paul, if you have any questions at this stage.
You know, according to the witness statements of the War of Independence, your uncle was part of Belmont Volunteers.
That's right.
But it appears your uncle, along with other Liskeavy men, you know, they were unhappy with Belmont and they transferred over to Milltown. Do you know any more about this?
Well, I suppose it comes very close to the time that my father had left the area. But you see, okay, what there was said that there wasn't enough action in the area. So, and that's why they left. But that's their own prerogative, I suppose. And there was actually at the time when Milltown or when Belmont was a big number of people in it, that there was no word at all about what was going on in Milltown. But Milltown then moved up the ranks, and there was more involved in it. But it just point out as well that the barracks in the two ambushes that was in Milltown, the second one was just coming up to the signing of the treaty, and if that didn't happen at that time, Milltown would have been burned to the ground. But it strikes me as strange, but the ambush happened each time within rifle range of the barracks. You know, when it happened at the T junction for when you come down from Kilgavern to the main Tuam road, there was no houses or anything in the way at that side, but you'll still see it today in the barracks in Milltown. There's a side window there, and out of that it could look straight up the road towards right up as far as Carraray, and that's what was used to pin down the anybody that tried to come out and take the weapons away. Likewise, I understand there was another one, an ambush on the other side as you go up the hill, what you say by Charlie Sheridan's. And the same thing was that no weapon could be recovered when they were injured because of what fire that was brought on to bear on them from the actual barracks. So, I know military strategists, but it was still within range of the barracks itself. And likewise, in Castle Grove as well, they were well fortified when you come to raid them. But that's all I can say about the split up in Belmont. Was that the feeling was that they wanted more action, and I just wanted to say that my father's predecessor, he was very John McHugh. He was very lucky because he lived in Lehed after that, and they pulled him out one night in the middle of the night, and frost and ice and everything, and threw him into the pond opposite his house. That's what the son told me. And they fired shots down, and he was very lucky that they missed him, and he it was miraculous he escaped that. But Johnny Brennan, who I mentioned earlier on, his land ran down to the Belmont Lake or to the Clare River, and between himself and McHugh, they had a little boat, and if the RIC came from the top side to Lehed and pushed them down, they could cross the river in the boat, which they had hidden in the rushes. And likewise, if he wanted to go the other way, Johnny Brennan, they could bring it up, but that was the supply route there.
In relation to your father, you said he went to Belgium. Was that to get away from the war? What was that the reason he resigned from Belmont?
Yes, I would say, yeah. He didn't resign. He just left. He couldn't say, "Here I am. I have to go." But from that day out, because as I say, all of them, if you were anyways up the rank at all, you were a target. And he was, after Michael McHugh, he was number one, and the family and the place in Liskeavy, I wonder why it was never burned down, but it certainly was shot up, and his mother was never recovered after it.
And you said Pete fought for the Republican side in the Civil War. Right. Did the rest of the family take the same side?
Well, you see, at that time, when my father had gone away, John Brennan was in America, and Mary Ann, I can't answer for her now at that stage what position she was, but I'd say she stayed Republican, and I'm not sure what Tom Brennan was, but I know Tom Brennan was active because they raided his house looking for Pete one time, and I declare to God, Michael showed me. It's Michael Hindley because his grandfather was the Thomas, but there was a little hole about this width up in the corner of the kitchen, and they said to him, "What's up there?" I said, "There's nothing up there. You couldn't get up in it." But he was up there, and it was a miracle, however, he got up there. But I can't answer for whether Thomas stayed on the Republican side or not, and John was in America. Mary Ann, I can't be sure of that. But I'd say guessing. I would be only guessing. Yeah.
And so why do you think the Brennans decided to get so involved in the struggle of independence?
Well, I suppose 1916 was the motivation for everybody, and they said, right, we've got to do something. We've got to stop this this being completely dominated by English rule. And but even my grandfather, he wasn't a tenant because he owned his own land, and that was another thing as well that was happening in the War of Independence, is that to getting back the land from the likes of Loon and Blake and those. Loon never wanted to give up the land either. So what they done is all the tenants got together. Now, he isn't a tenant of Loon. So they all went to Loon's house in Kilconnelly and called him out. That's what I heard, the people were there. And they called him out, and Loon came out to try and reason with them, but they weren't having it. And they tried to pull him out through the window, but he escaped. And I know myself that that house was a big house, but it had a sewerage system in it that he went down into and got out, and it came out at the back of the orchard down below. And he laid wait and he got a train, because the Castle Grove station was built for his convenience, and he escaped away. But that then led to a large scale in burning the house, and the takeover went on, and the stuff going every side. In fact, somebody told me that there was a tractor and they drove it down the road. And when they knew that the RSC was coming looking for everything, they drove it into the back in Belmont Lake. That's where it wound up. But there was people riding around in horse and traps and carriages for a couple of days afterwards.